Linda was in a coma for many years. When Jack woke up, he thought I still liked him. But he didn't know I was already married. At the class reunion, during a game, the loser had to kiss someone as a penalty. Jack had his eyes set confidently on me. But then, I turned and kissed the cheek of the person beside me and shouted, "Hubby." Jack woke up on a rainy day. Those 3 years of sleep didn't change him at all, he was just as stubborn. Holding the food Aunt made especially for him, I sighed. I owed Aunt, and I couldn't refuse to take care of Jack. As soon as I pushed open the door to Jack's room, he shot me a sharp look. "You're awake?" I ignored his gaze and sat beside him. I placed the insulated lunch box on the table. "Aunt made your favorite dishes. Want some?" "Why are you here?" "Where's my mom?" "Aunt's really tired lately. She's resting." I looked at Jack's pale face again and asked, "Want to eat?" "I can feed you." Saying that must have struck a nerve. Jack snapped back, "No, I'm not hungry." Well, being fed by someone you despise is probably worse than not eating at all. I blinked, expecting his reaction, and began playing on my phone, ignoring his attitude. "Hey, are you here to take care of me or to play on your phone?" Turning my head, I saw Jack glaring at me with a hint of red in his eyes from frustration. If he had the strength, I bet he'd knock my phone out of my hands and mock me. Just as I was about to reply, his stomach growled loudly. Jack shut his eyes and turned away, embarrassed to lose face in front of me. "Eat while it's warm," I slowly said. He seemed unwilling, but when I brought the food to his mouth, he ate, looking like he was swallowing his pride. I almost laughed at the sight. After eating, Jack called out to me, a mischievous smile on his face, "You really didn't want me to wake up, did you?" His oversized hospital gown hung loosely on his thin frame. "I'm glad you woke up," I said seriously. "Your mom and dad miss you." His lips parted, eyes lingering on me, hand braced to say something, but he suddenly turned away. I used to like Jack, and I used to hate him too. I first saw Jack during a math competition in middle school. His bright, sunny smile was out of place amidst the stress of the event. Back then, I didn't understand what liking someone meant. Yet, after seeing him, I would look for him everywhere, until the competition ended and I returned to my own school, putting those thoughts aside. I thought I'd never see Jack again, but fate has its way of being unpredictable. When my dad and Jack's mom got together, it was a shock. But in the 3rd year, my dad passed away suddenly. I thought I'd be left alone, but Jack's mom didn't turn me away. She took me in, and when she remarried Jack's dad in the 4th year, I followed them and met Jack again. While I was thrilled, Jack was the complete opposite. If I was happy, he was equally resentful. He blamed my dad for luring his mom away, tearing his family apart. But I still liked Jack for his rare moments of kindness, for sticking up for me and tending to my wounds. Yet, my affection shattered with each insult he threw at me once he realized I liked him. "You're as shameless as your dad, you make me sick," he sneered. At that time, I hated him. That's in the past though. Over the 3 years that Jack lay on that hospital bed, my hatred faded away, especially as I watched Aunt's black hair turn silver. With the insulated box in hand, I left the hospital and saw Shawn waiting for me. The orange sunset cast a glow around him as he waved. Running into his arms, I asked, "Why are you here?" Shawn brushed my hair and replied with his deep, brown eyes, "You don't want me here?" "Well, are you jealous?" I teased. "Yes." "Ah." I kissed Shawn's chin and said, "I love you the most." Maybe it's not that I stopped hating Jack, maybe I simply don't care anymore. And this is the 1st year of my secret marriage to Shawn. Jack, still unable to move properly, grew even more short-tempered. Especially when I was around to tend to him, feeding him, adjusting his blanket. His worldview seemed to get darker each day. One afternoon, I was late visiting him because I had to see my advisor. Jack was quick to voice his irritation. "You're late." Rolling my eyes, I wondered how he knew what's late without a phone or clock in the room. I got held up, I explained, but Jack wouldn't have it. Furious, he stared at me, and when I set the insulated lunch box on the table, he knocked it off. The warm soup inside splashed, leaving my hand red and swollen. I didn't lash out, simply dabbed my hand dry with a tissue, calmly ready to walk out and leave him be. But then, I saw Jack's trembling hand and something softened inside me. Being unable to move overnight must be torture. Frustrating, painful. I watched as he locked eyes with mine, before quickly looking away. I sighed. Why didn't you agree to the rehab Aunt suggested? Jack didn't respond, but I noticed his eyelashes trembling. I seized the moment and said, don't want to do rehab, huh? You don't think I'm gonna feed you forever, do you? No way, stop flattering yourself. Jack whipped his head around to look at me, eager to clarify. He seemed to realize he was too eager and got a bit annoyed. So, he raised an eyebrow and smugly pulled out his high school go-to. Linda, my mom doesn't know, right? About someone she took in out of pity secretly liking her son? Don't worry, just listen to me, and I won't tell her. His words hit my ears, and I shook my head lightly. 3 years hadn't changed Jack a bit, but maybe he didn't know I wasn't the same 17-year-old girl he used to manipulate. Jack was still stuck at 18. Not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Thanks for not telling her. I spoke with a blank expression. I offered Jack the food again. He glanced at me, seemingly dissatisfied with my attitude, and grumbled, inkling something under his breath. Once I can move, you'll be in trouble. Say what? But Jack didn't say more. He struggled to eat, like I was feeding him poison or something. Later that night, I got a call from his mom. She happily told me Jack agreed to rehab, but soon enough, she started crying. 3 years, over 1,000 days and nights, no one knew how she managed to hang in there. That evening, Shawn noticed the burn mark on the back of my hand. He didn't ask how it happened. Instead, he gently held my hand, blowing on the injured skin for a good while. Watching Shawn's focused expression, I felt an overwhelming sweetness inside me. It doesn't hurt. I hooked my arm around his, sweetly saying. Shawn didn't acknowledge my words, instead asking, what do you want for dinner? I knew Shawn was a bit upset. I smiled slightly and looped my fingers around his neck. Whatever you make, I'll love it. Don't be mad. After Jack gets better, I'll try not to meet him. Only then did Shawn look at me, letting out a satisfied hum before planting a kiss on my lips. The crimson sunset spilled through the floor to ceiling windows, lighting the room. More red than the sunset were my cheeks and ears. I leaned into his arms, listening to the pounding of his heart. Jack's been really proactive with his rehab lately, and it's showing. He can do simple tasks with his arms now, like eating and picking stuff up. But his legs still need work, so he's stuck with a wheelchair if he wants to go out. I remember the day I brought him food. He proudly picked up the chopsticks, stealing glances at me while eating. Not seeing a reaction, he soon got grumpy by himself. It's great his arms recovered, but the nightmare started after he could use his phone because he texted me non-stop. Your phone's buzzing. Shawn nudged my arm, and I instinctively checked. Sure enough, it was Jack. Sweet and sour ribs, homemade. Just a simple sentence, classic Jack. I didn't even bother to roll my eyes. Shawn suddenly laughed. I turned to him and saw him holding up his hands, saying with a chuckle he couldn't hide, sorry, I wasn't trying to snoop. How is he so boring? Sigh. I shook my head lightly. That night, Shawn made the sweet and sour ribs. He handed me the packed meal container, and I felt guilt wash over me for putting Shawn through this. He saw right through me, pulling me into a strong hug. His voice by my ear, I'm not that forgiving, but I don't want to make it tough for you. His words reached straight to my heart, as if it were on fire, thank you. Shawn just smiled, don't you think I deserve a little reward? Confused, I looked at him. He gestured to his cheek, asking for a kiss. Jack wasn't happy with the sweet and sour ribs, complaining the meat was too dry or too sweet. He found plenty of fault but finished the whole plate nonetheless. Satisfied, he leaned in bed and ordered me to take him out for a stroll, wanting to see the night sky. I turned him down, expressionless. Jack flipped out, unable to believe I'd refuse him. It's getting chilly out there. Aren't you afraid of catching a cold? I explained. Mainly because if he did catch one, his folks would have to care for him, and I didn't want to worry his mom. Yet he took it another way, coldly laughing, worried about me? I stood there, dumbfounded. Thankfully, Jack didn't want to hear my reply. He gazed sharply at me, continuing, "Heard you're at college here. Back then, you said you wanted to go far away. What happened to that?" I admired Jack. That line was something I wrote in my high school notebook, 3 years ago, and he still remembered. Just decided not to go. I answered casually. I glanced at my phone for the time. Shawn was almost at the hospital to pick me up. Jack didn't believe it. Sitting upright with arms crossed, he looked up at me like he was peering down. "No matter your reason, I definitely won't." But Jack stopped short, frowning and caught up in the words he left unsaid. It was 8 p.m. when I grabbed the thermal lunchbox and left his room. Sure enough, Shawn was waiting outside. Suddenly, my heart was a storm, though moments earlier it was calm. Right now, all I want is for Jack to be fully recovered. Walk on his own, just like before. That's the best thing for his parents too, so none of us dare upset him, worried he might quit rehab if he throws a fit. For me, it's mostly because his mom was always kind. She provided for my meals and education, and I have no way to repay her. So when Jack texts me with requests, I usually give in. Whenever Jack wants something, it's Shawn's cooking. And afterward, Shawn always asks for a small reward from me. Watching Shawn make food for Jack breaks my heart. One time, I offered to cook instead, but Shawn shot me down. "No way, I haven't even let my wife cook. There's no way he gets to eat your cooking." I hugged Shawn from behind, my heart drowning in a warm bath. "You're too good to be true." "I'm not doing well, you're the one who's good," Shawn said seriously. When summer break arrived, Jack's leg was almost healed. The day he was discharged, I got to the hospital around noon. Just as I stepped out of the elevator, someone called out to me, "Linda." I turned around instinctively and saw the little girl I met that day when I was taking Jack for a spin downstairs. She smiled shyly at me, clutching a chocolate bar tightly in her hand. "What's up, is something wrong?" I asked. She rolled her wheelchair closer, clearly mustering a lot of courage as she handed me the chocolate. "Linda, could you give this chocolate to Jack for me? I probably won't ever see him again." I immediately understood her feelings, and it was a mixed bag inside me. Jack just happened to bump into her, chatted a few times, showing his humorous side, and she got hooked. But little did she know that was all a facade. The real Jack was cold and arrogant. I couldn't refuse her. So, I took the chocolate, saying, "Sure." The moment I walked into Jack's room, he spotted the chocolate in my hand and shot me a glance, sneering, "I don't like this brand of chocolate." I calmly placed the chocolate on his lap. "Remember the girl in the wheelchair we met downstairs? She wanted me to give it to you." Jack frowned for a moment, recalling who she was, then nodded in realization. "You still like playing delivery girl, don't you?" Jack said, taunting me. I knew exactly what he was referring to. Back in high school, lots of girls had me pass love letters to Jack. The sunlight streamed onto Jack's face. His long eyelashes flickered like butterflies taking flight. His slightly long hair partially obscured his cold eyes. Just like before, he tossed the chocolate into the trash bin without a second thought. To him, those gifts full of affection were just unrecyclable trash. Aunt and uncle walked in just then, saying everything was ready, and we could leave right away. Jack nodded, calmly lifted the blanket, stood up, and walked out. He was leaving the place that held him for 3 long years. After Jack moved back home, I tried to avoid seeing him and rarely went home. But that didn't stop Jack from finding ways to bother me. That Saturday, Aunt asked me to come home early for a family dinner. I couldn't say no. Hoping to dodge Jack, I headed straight to my bedroom once I got home. But soon enough, there was a knock on my door. I thought it was Aunt. But to my surprise, it was Jack standing there, with a load of clothes in his arms. He raised an eyebrow and said, "Here are some dirty clothes for you." I didn't move a muscle. Jack seemed impatient and tried shoving the clothes into my arms. I stepped back, and the clothes scattered all over the floor. Now it was my turn to raise an eyebrow. Crossing my arms, I said, "Wash your own clothes. You have hands, don't you?" Jack was stunned, not believing I said that. He frowned, about to retort, but I interrupted, "Are you going to threaten me again? Saying you'll tell Aunt that I like you? Go ahead." With that, I slammed the door shut, not bothering to see his expression. Back in high school, Jack used that threat to make me wash his clothes, run errands, do his homework, and even run laps with him when he got punished. Aunt knocked again, calling me out for dinner. Sitting at the table, I glanced at Jack. It seemed he hadn't told Aunt about the liking thing. Jack seemed to notice my stare. He looked up silently, mouthing, "Just you wait." Aunt got Jack a tutor, hoping he'd retake the college entrance exam and get into a school he likes. I thought maybe this would make Jack quiet down for a while. But I really underestimated him. Shawn's birthday was coming up. After much thought, I decided to get him a bottle of cologne. I hoped whenever he smelled it, he'd think of me. So, I ordered it right away. I wanted it shipped to Shawn's place, but worried he'd find out, ruining the surprise. So, I used Aunt's address instead. I eagerly awaited the delivery. I'd planned the packaging and rehearsed what to say when I gave it to Shawn. Never did I expect someone would pick up my package. When I got the delivery notification, I was stunned. I called the courier instantly. They told me the person knew my phone's last digits and my name. They couldn't refuse to hand it over. An uneasy feeling crept in as I asked, "What did he look like?" The courier's description made it clear Jack took it. I called Jack, but it went to voicemail every time. Frustrated, I gave in and changed into something else. I knocked on Jack's door for almost a full minute before he casually opened it. Leaning against the door frame, he asked leisurely, "What do you want?" "My package, hand it over," I demanded. "Oh, you mean this?" He revealed the cologne from behind his back, already unboxed. Smirking, he toyed with the bottle and said, "Maybe if you beg, I'll give it back." A flood of memories flashed before my eyes. I knew if I blew up then, I'd fall into Jack's trap. So I took a step back, looking at him like he was crazy. "Jack, you're so immature." With that, I turned to leave, but Jack grabbed my wrist. "Who are you calling immature?" he challenged. "Let go," I replied coldly. His lips pressed into a hard line. His grip tightened until Aunt's voice came from the living room. That snapped him out of it. He let go, his eyes drifting to my reddened wrist, confusion clouding his gaze. I didn't see Jack for several days after that, no clue what he was up to in his room. I decided I didn't want that bottle of perfume anymore, so I bought Shawn a pair of sneakers as a birthday gift instead. But that day, when I opened the door, there was the perfume bottle sitting at my doorstep with a note from Jack. I peeled it off to read. "Sorry, I was wrong that day." I was in disbelief, thinking this might be another one of Jack's tricks. So I tossed the note and perfume in the trash and left without looking back. Yet, Jack seemed to chill out. At night, I went to the living room for water. Hearing the buttons of a gaming console, I glanced over to see Jack playing games on the couch. He noticed my footsteps and turned down the volume. "Did I wake you?" he asked. "I'll stop playing after this round." I shook my head while pouring water. "Nope. Even after I finished my drink, Jack was still staring at me. Anything else? I asked with a slight frown. Jack seemed a bit embarrassed and looked down, tossing the game controller on the coffee table as he stood up. Wait here. I was puzzled. Soon, Jack came out of his room with a small box in hand. For you. Seeing the logo, I instantly got it. Jack had replaced my lost item. No need, I refused. But Jack insisted, placing it in my hand, his cool fingers making me step back. I was wrong that day, don't be mad, he said, lowering his eyes awkwardly. It's late, I'm going to sleep now. Night. He then hurried off. Holding the box, I felt like I was dreaming. Sunday was Shawn's birthday, so on Saturday he asked if I had plans and wanted to hang out. I knew what he meant, but since I had a surprise for him, I said I didn't have time. He paused for a second over the phone, then nonchalantly said, "No worries." Hearing that, my heart twisted. I wanted nothing more than to run to him right then. After hanging up, I anxiously watched time tick by. I wanted to be the first to celebrate his birthday. When it hit 10 p.m., I went to pick up the cake. After wandering a bit, I took a cab to Shawn's place. At 11:50 p.m., I knocked on the door. I was supposed to be the one giving the surprise, but my heart raced like it was about to leap out of my chest. Shawn opened it, and his eyes filled with shock and joy when he saw me. Happy birthday. I flew into his arms, and he hugged me tightly back. I swear I heard his heartbeat too. We turned off the lights, leaving just the cake's candles flickering. Shawn's figure melted into the darkness, only the faint candlelight lit his face as he earnestly made a wish, casting shadows from his long lashes on the wall. Done. He blew out the candles. What do you wish for? I teased. He looked up with a secretive smile. I'll tell you when we're 100. Can we make it to 100? Of course. He held my hand, fingers intertwined. We'll have not just 100, but even 200 years, in this life and the next. Jack's change was unbelievable to me. At first, I thought it was some new game he was playing. But a month passed, and he was still different. It made me wonder if he finally understood that bullying was childish and just a way to fill a twisted void. One day, my aunt called, asking me to visit because she had something to tell Jack and me. When I arrived, the table was set with all my favorite dishes, to my surprise. I was taken aback, but my aunt smiled. Jack picked these out. Let me know what else you like, and I'll make it. I shook my head quickly. These are great. Love your cooking, Auntie. Such a sweet talker. Her smile bloomed, and I realized it had been a while since I'd seen her smile. I was almost transported back in time. I glanced at Jack, puzzled as to how he knew what I liked. He didn't shy away from my gaze, instead just smiled, showing 8 teeth, his cold eyes softening with that grin. Over dinner, my aunt explained she and my uncle were going out this Sunday and wouldn't be back until Monday. I assured her it wasn't a problem. I was so focused, I didn't notice the mischievous glint in Jack's eyes. That Saturday, Jack casually hinted he'd be watching a movie on Sunday and maybe hit the mall, saying he hadn't been out in years and wondered if things had changed. I didn't think much of it at the time, just nodded and recommended a couple of cool places. Rain started Saturday night, light drops tapping the windows with a gentle sound. By morning, it hadn't let up. I opened the window, letting raindrops in. The gray sky obscured the distance. The phone rang at noon, Jack's quick breaths mixing with the rain's patter as he spoke. Linda, I. Before I could answer, the call cut off. I sat up in a hurry, panic spreading from my chest. My hands and feet felt numb. I kept calling back, but no answer. At that moment, I thought about Jack in high school, covered in blood. He was so pale as they rushed him into the ER. I remembered my aunt fainting because she couldn't handle it and my uncle pacing back and forth. Shaking, I threw on some clothes and dashed downstairs. I scoured every movie theater, describing a guy over 6 feet tall, wearing a black t-shirt and shorts, with a necklace. I was desperate, asking again and again, but every staff member said they hadn't seen him. I figured Jack must have finished the movie and was in the mall. My clothes were soaked, and I couldn't tell if it was rain or tears on my face as I sprinted down the street like a lunatic. I searched the mall but still couldn't find him. Standing in despair, my mind was blank. A cool breeze cut through me, and I shivered violently. I planned to go home and take one last look, then I'd have to tell Aunt and Uncle and call the police. I opened the door in a daze, only to see Jack sitting on the couch with skewers and beer on the coffee table. Jack looked me up and down like some drowned rat. He raised an eyebrow, smirking, and said, "What happened to you?" It hit me right then. A month of niceness was a lie. He was waiting for this moment, for some thorough revenge. My body shook uncontrollably, my rain-drenched pants dripping, leaving a trail. I underestimated Jack, underestimated how cruel he could be. He let out a mocking laugh, slowly stood up, and walked over to me, leaning down to meet my eyes. "Think you can fight me?" I stared at him silently, then suddenly slapped him, cutting off his unfinished words. Jack turned his head. After a moment, he poked his cheek with his tongue, then yanked my arm without a word and dragged me to the sofa. "Dare to hit me? Has the rain made you stupid?" My struggle was nothing to Jack as he pinned me on the couch, forcing me to apologize. "Jack, I hate you." And just like that, the tears wouldn't stop flowing. I once said I liked Jack, then said I hated him. Now, I truly despised him. I never denied my teenage crush, but now it makes me sick just thinking about ever liking him. He destroyed the Jack from middle school, the Jack I once had a crush on. Jack watched my tears, his body tensed. He abruptly let go of me, stood up in confusion, and almost ran out of the living room. I trembled and called Shawn. I didn't want to stay here a second longer. After I left, I got a high fever. For 3 days, Shawn took care of me without rest. I vaguely woke a few times to see Shawn looking at me with concern. Holding his hand to my cheek, I was grateful he was there. By the 4th afternoon, my fever broke, and Shawn finally relaxed. He never asked me anything, just hugged me tightly, saying gently, "Don't make me worry like this again, okay?" I quickly patted his back in reassurance, swearing, "Don't worry, I promise it won't happen again." Shawn hummed softly, satisfied, "I'll get you some porridge." On the 5th day, I got a message from Jack. "Mom says she misses you, wants you over for dinner." I ignored it because if Aunt wanted me to come over, she'd call, not go through Jack. Days before summer break ended, I got a message from our high school class president, hoping we'd join a reunion. He even said it'd be rude not to come, so I couldn't refuse. We agreed to meet that Sunday at 6 p.m. Shawn and I got there a few minutes early. When the waiter opened the door, many classmates were already inside. The class president greeted us warmly as we sat down. I didn't notice when the door opened again until a shadow fell over me. Looking up, it was Jack. I barely frowned. I didn't expect Jack to be here, but it made sense. He was also a classmate, after all. The class president announced everyone was here. "Food's not ready, let's play some games and drink a bit." Everyone agreed, and we started a game of sevens. The person whose turn it is can drink or take on a dare. Maybe it was because of my recent cold, but I kept messing up calling or clapping wrong. "Drink or dare?" They asked me eagerly. I blurted, "Dare." Then, "Find someone in the room and kiss them." The president grinned. As soon as he said that, Jack glanced at him, confidently tapping his glass while eyeing me. But I turned to Shawn, who smiled at me with those sparkling eyes, completely captivating me. I quickly planted a kiss on his cheek and, without thinking, called out, "Hubby." Shawn affectionately ruffled my hair and spoke openly, "Sorry, she isn't great with alcohol and has had a bit too much." I snorted, teasing him back, "Not true." The class president hovered close, eyeing us curiously. "You too?" "We're married," Shawn answered, pulling me closer. Our announcement caused gasps around us. Shawn apologized to the class president. "Sorry, we have to leave. I'm worried she'll have a stomach ache." With that, we headed out. All right, no problem." The class president frantically waved his hand. Shawn helped me stand up, and my gaze landed on Jack across the room. He was staring at me intensely, gripping his glass so tightly that the veins on his hand were popping out, like he was about to flip the table over. "Wait a minute." Jack slowly rose to his feet, his sharp eyes fixed on Shawn. "You said you're married? As Linda's family, how come I didn't know?" Shawn smirked, his expression unchanging. "We're keeping it under wraps for now. If you want to see the marriage certificate, just say the word. But do us a favor and keep it a secret for now, little brother-in-law." Jack's face went from red to white to blue. You'd think he was putting on a show with all those color changes. Shawn wrapped his arm around my shoulder and started leading me out. The fresh air filled my lungs, but it made my head spin even more. "Look at that moon tonight, it's beautiful, isn't it?" he said. "But not as beautiful as you." Shawn leaned down to kiss me on my eyelids, and I trembled, closing my eyes. After the class reunion, Jack didn't contact me for a month. Even when my aunt invited me over for dinner, he was nowhere to be found. Not that I minded. I was hoping he'd stay far away from me. But I was wrong. I had no idea how he found out where I was having classes. The next time I saw Jack was beneath the teaching building. He was watching me from a distance, the wind catching the hem of his white t-shirt. I intended to act as if I hadn't seen him and walk around, but he shouted my name, running over to stand in front of me. "What do you want?" I asked, puzzled. Jack didn't answer my question. Instead, he smiled as he spoke, the wind carrying his reluctant laughter to my ear. "It's like I had a dream. I dreamed you got married. Isn't that hilarious? You're only a senior in college." "It's true." I cut off Jack's self-delusion. "I really did get married, Jack." Jack's smile shattered, and the corners of his mouth froze in place. He got closer, tilted his head slightly, looked me straight in the eyes, and forced a bitter smile. "I know you're still upset because I tricked you that day. I'm apologizing now, but please, don't say things just to hurt me." I frowned slightly. Hadn't Jack learned a thing in the month we hadn't seen each other? "Think whatever you want," I said, deciding not to argue with him anymore. I moved to walk past him. Jack, however, persistently followed me in silence. I finally lost my patience and spun around, my voice rising in frustration. "What do you want? Stop following me." At that moment, I clearly saw Jack's eyes redden. "Linda," he started, "I've been thinking a lot this past month. Thought about the first time I met you, about the 2 years I bullied you, and the 3 years I was unconscious. And it all boils down to the class reunion. I've been realizing things, like all those birthday gifts you gave me that are still in my cabinet. I've thought a lot, and I realized I like you." Hearing that from Jack was like someone telling me the world would end tomorrow. I was stunned. Jack suddenly laughed. "Linda, didn't you say you liked me? I like you too. Will you be with me? I'll treat you right and make up for the past." The breeze ruffled my hair. I sighed. "It doesn't matter if you like me now, Jack. We can't be together because I don't like you anymore, and I'm already married. But you used to say you liked me. Like you said, that was in the past. Now, I love my husband." Saying that, I turned away, not looking back at Jack's gradually crumbling expression. I thought after that day Jack wouldn't bother me again. He didn't. He went after Shawn instead. When Jack called Shawn, we were lying in bed together. "Jack asked you to go downstairs?" I asked. Shawn got dressed and reassured me, "Don't worry. I'll handle it." After Shawn left, I couldn't calm down. I ended up throwing on a coat and going downstairs too. I hid in the stairway, watching Shawn and Jack. I was ready to jump out if things went sideways. I didn't hear their conversation, but suddenly Jack punched Shawn, and Shawn fought back. I was shocked but quickly snapped out of it and rushed over. When I got close enough, I heard Jack shouting, "You're despicable. If I hadn't been in a coma for 3 years, would Linda even be with you? I thought you were up to no good back in high school." Shawn had Jack pinned and cut him off. "You lost Linda, that's on you. Plenty of people would treasure her. You deserve to regret it for the rest of your life." I reached them, panic-stricken, and pulled at Shawn's arm. "Stop it. Stop it. If he gets hurt, it'll cost us money." Hearing my voice, Shawn let go. He released Jack's collar, stood up, and looked down at Jack coldly. Jack's cheek was bruised, and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. He staggered to his feet and looked at me. "Linda, if you didn't like me, why did you take care of me in the hospital and cook for me?" His eyes held a desperate hope. "It was our aunt who asked Linda to look after you. And the meals you ate were cooked by me," Shawn explained without a hint of emotion. Jack stepped back, visibly trembling, and looked at me with anguish. "Is it true?" I nodded. "Yes, it's true." Shawn took my hand. "Why'd you come down without a coat? What if you catch a cold? Let's go back upstairs." "Okay." Fingers interlocked with Shawn, I brushed past Jack and headed upstairs step by step. "He said you had a crush on me since high school. Did you like me since freshman year?" I asked. Shawn replied, "Do you remember the first time you spoke to me? You said, 'Hey Shawn, the teacher wants to collect the notes.' I can never forget that moment." Feelings often arise unintentionally, maybe on a still morning or during a quiet afternoon. After this, I decided to tell my aunt and uncle about my marriage to Shawn. I called my aunt on Friday to let them know I was married, and had been for over a year. She was shocked and promptly asked us to bring Shawn over that Sunday so they could meet him. I immediately agreed. On Sunday, Shawn was incredibly nervous, changing his outfit 4 or 5 times, never thinking he looked polished enough or formal enough. Then he started worrying if the gifts he bought were enough, and if Julia and Michael would like them. Watching his anxious demeanor, I couldn't help but chuckle. We arrived home right around noon when Julia had just finished cooking. Julia and Michael looked Shawn up and down, seemingly satisfied with his appearance. No need to bring gifts. Sitting on the couch, Shawn answered all the questions about his family and current situation confidently. Julia nodded approvingly and gave me a look. "All right, let's have lunch." As we sat down, Jack walked out of his room with bruises on his cheeks. He seemed surprised seeing Shawn and me together. "What are you doing here?" Julia quickly explained, "You've been cooped up in your room these days. I didn't have a chance to tell you Linda and her partner came for a meal. You know them, right?" Jack smirked. "Of course I know him, he's my high school classmate." Julia beamed with a smile. "High school classmates, that's wonderful, you know each other well." Jack settled into a chair, staring sharply at Shawn and me, while Shawn squeezed my hand tightly under the table. Julia continued, "So when do you plan to hold the wedding? Your uncle and I have been looking forward to it." Excited, I said, "Julia, are you okay with this? Nothing beats the joy of having family support." This seemed to tick off Jack. Before Julia could reply, Jack stood up suddenly, veins bulging in his hands. "My mom might agree, but I don't." He flipped the table, spilling food everywhere. Julia gasped, "Jack, are you crazy?" "I am crazy. Mom, I like Linda." My eyes widened in disbelief. The fragile picture of family harmony shattered. Shawn hugged me tightly, but I still saw Michael slap Jack, scolding him, "You fool." The visit was chaotic. I quietly apologized to Shawn, but he gently covered my lips. "None of this is your fault, don't blame yourself." I nodded vigorously, my throat tightening. I thought I must have saved Shawn in a past life to meet him in this one. One good thing was that Shawn and I got accepted to study abroad during our junior year, so soon we'd be off to Australia. Julia called again to apologize for Jack and asked about the wedding plans. I then mentioned our trip to Australia. Sounds great, she said. I think Shawn is a reliable guy. Let us know when you arrive safely. Now, let's eat before it gets cold. Unconsciously, fall had arrived. The dry leaves crunched underfoot. During this time, Jack sent me many messages until I blocked him. He even searched for me at school, but I purposely avoided him, never meeting him. The last time I saw him was a couple of days before I left the country. He looked worn out, wearing a casual white shirt, hair slightly long, covering his eyes. His head hung low, lost in thought. I ignored him and took a different route. On the day I left, at the airport, I got a call from an unknown number. The silence told me it was Jack. Eventually, he spoke. You used to beg me, and now can I beg you, please don't leave. I glanced at Shawn, seeing my reflection in his clear eyes, only me. Take care of Julia and Michael. Live well. I hung up and gently squeezed Shawn's hand. He wrapped his arms around me. I love you. Huh? I replied shyly, looking up. Why so sweet today? Shawn playfully raised an eyebrow. Don't you like it? I do. I paused. I love you too. Together, we boarded the plane to our next happy destination.